when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. The prophet Daniel's 70th week prophecy, Daniel 9, verse 27. Then he, the Antichrist, shall confirm, i.e., back up or strengthen, a covenant and agreement with many for 1 week, i.e., 7 years, i.e., the 7 year tribulation. But in the middle of the week, i.e., the 3.5 year mark of the 7 year tribulation, he, the Antichrist, shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering in the newly built third temple, and on the wing of abomination shall be one, the Antichrist, who makes desolate, even until the consummation, the 7 year period of the tribulation, which is determined, is poured out on the desolate, false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers. Daniel 7, verse 25. He, the Antichrist, shall speak pompous words against the Most High God Almighty. The Antichrist shall persecute the saints, tribulation believers of the Most High God Almighty, and the Antichrist shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints, tribulation believers, shall be given into his, the Antichrist's hand, for a time and times and half a time, i.e., 3.5 years or 42 months. Daniel 11, verse 31. And forces shall be mustered by him, the Antichrist, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress, the newly built third temple. Then they shall take away the daily sacrifices, and place there in the newly built third temple the abomination of desolation. Daniel 12, verse 7. Then I, Daniel, heard the man clothed in linen, the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ, who is above the waters of the river, when he, Jesus Christ, held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore by him, God Almighty, who lives forever, that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time, i.e., 3.5 years or 42 months. And when the power of the holy people, the children of Israel, the Jewish people, has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. Daniel 12, verse 11. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up in the newly built third temple, there shall be 1,290 days, i.e., 43 months, or 3.5 years plus 30 days. Jesus Christ's warning about what will come. Matthew 24, verses 15, 16, and 21. And Jesus answered and said to them, Therefore when you, the children of Israel, the Jewish people, see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place in the newly built third temple, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those, the children of Israel, the Jewish people, who are in Judea, in Israel, etc., flee to the mountains. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. John 5, verse 43. Then he, Jesus, answered and said to them, I, Jesus Christ, have come in my Father's name, God Almighty, and you, false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers, do not receive me. If another, the Antichrist, comes in his own name, him, the Antichrist, you will receive. The revelation of Jesus Christ, the beginning of the seven seal judgments upon the world, Satan's world, by God Almighty himself. Revelation 6, verses 1 and 2. Now I, John, saw when the Lamb, Jesus Christ, opened one of the seven seals, i.e., the seven seal judgments, and I, John, heard one of the four living creatures saying with a voice like thunder, Come and see. And I, John, looked, and behold, a white horse. He, the rider who sat on it, this white horse, had a bow, and a crown was given to him, the rider on this white horse. And he, the rider on this white horse, went out conquering and to conquer. Revelation 6, verses 3 and 4. When he, the Lamb, Jesus Christ, opened the second seal of the seven seal judgments, I, John, heard the second living creature saying, Come and see. Another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one, the rider who sat on it, the fiery red horse, to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill, slaughter one another. And there was given to him, the rider on the fiery red horse, a great sword. Revelation 6, verses 5 and 6. When he, the Lamb, Jesus Christ, opened the third seal of the seven seal judgments, I, John, heard the third living creature say, Come and see. So I, John, looked, and behold, a black horse, and he, the rider who sat on it, the black horse, had a pair of scales in his hand. And I, John, heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, A quart of wheat for a denarius, 1 whole day's wages for a worker, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, 1 whole day's wages for a worker, and do not harm the oil and the wine. Revelation 6, verses 7 and 8. When he, the Lamb, Jesus Christ, opened the fourth seal of the seven seal judgments, I, John, heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, Come and see. So I, John, looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him, the rider who sat on it, the pale horse, was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power, authority was given by God Almighty to them, Death and Hades, over a fourth of the earth. Current population 7.7 billion people. 7.7 times a quarter equals 1.925 billion people. To kill, slaughter with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beast of the earth. Note, during the 7-year tribulation, there will be 7 seal judgments from God Almighty, followed by 7 trumpet judgments from God Almighty, and finally followed by 7 bowl judgments from God Almighty. And then Jesus Christ returns at the end of the 7-year tribulation, riding a white horse. Therefore, after the 7 seal judgments have passed, and after 6 of the 7 trumpet judgments have passed, Revelation 11 verses 1 through 3. Then I, John, was given a reed like a measuring rod, and the angel, God Almighty's holy angel, stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, the newly built third temple, the altar, and those who worship there. But leave out the court which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it, the court, has been given to the Gentiles, and they will tread the holy city, Jerusalem, underfoot for 42 months, i.e. 3.5 years. And I, God Almighty, will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they, the 2 witnesses, will prophesy 1,260 days, i.e. 42 months, or 3.5 years, clothed in sackcloth. These, the 2 witnesses, are the 2 olive trees, and the 2 lampstands, standing before the God of the earth, God Almighty. Revelation 12, verses 6 and 14. Then the woman, the children of Israel, the Jewish people, fled into the wilderness, where she is a place prepared by God, God Almighty, that they should feed her there 1,260 days, i.e. 42 months, or 3.5 years. But the woman, the children of Israel, the Jewish people, was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time, i.e. 3.5 years or 42 months, from the presence of the serpent, Satan. Revelation 12, verses 7 through 9 and 12b. And war broke out in heaven during the 7-year tribulation. Michael and his angels, God Almighty's holy angels, fought with the dragon, Satan. And the dragon, Satan, and his angels, the fallen angels, fought. But they, Satan and the fallen angels, did not prevail, because they were not strong enough, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, losing access to heaven, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He, Satan, was cast to the earth, and his angels, the fallen angels, were cast out, losing access to heaven with him. Then I, John, heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Woe the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil, Satan, has come down to you, having great wrath, because he, Satan, knows that he, Satan, has a short time. This sets the stage for Daniel's 70th week, midweek prophecy, Revelation 13, verses 1 through 8. Then I, John, stood on the sand of the sea, and I, John, saw a beast, the Antichrist, rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his 10 horns 10 crowns, and on his 7 heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast, the Antichrist, which I, John, saw, was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon, Satan, gave him, the Antichrist, his power, his throne, and great authority. And I, John, saw one of his 7 heads, as if, supposedly, it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was supposedly healed. And all the world, false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers, marveled and followed the beast, the Antichrist. So they, false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers, worshipped the dragon, Satan, who gave authority to the beast, the Antichrist. And they, false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers, worshipped the beast, the Antichrist, saying, Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And he, the Antichrist, was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And he, the Antichrist, was given authority to continue to make war for 42 months or 3.5 years. Then he, the Antichrist, opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, God Almighty, to blaspheme his name, God Almighty, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him, the Antichrist, to make war with the saints, tribulation believers, and overcome them. And authority was given him, the Antichrist, over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers who dwell on the earth will worship him, the Antichrist, whose names have not been written in the book of life, the Lamb's book of everlasting life, of the Lamb, Jesus Christ, slain from the foundation of the world. Revelation 13, verses 11 to 18. Then I, John, saw another beast, the false prophet, coming up out of the earth. And he, the false prophet, had 2 horns like a lamb, and spoke like a dragon, Satan. And he, the false prophet, exercises all the authority, through Satan, of the first beast, the Antichrist, in his, the Antichrist's presence, and causes the earth, and those false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers who dwell in it, to worship the first beast, the Antichrist, whose supposedly deadly wound was supposedly healed. He, the false prophet, performs great signs through Satan, so that he, the false prophet, even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he, the false prophet, deceives those false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers who dwell on the earth by those signs which he, the false prophet, was granted to do by Satan in the sight of the beast, the Antichrist, telling those false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast, the Antichrist, who was supposedly wounded by the sword and lived. He, the false prophet, was granted power by Satan to give breath, not the breath of life, to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many tribulation believers as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He, the Antichrist, causes all false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one, false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers, who has the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, the Antichrist, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666, 600 Finally, a dire warning. Revelation 14, verses 9 through 11. Then a third angel, God Almighty's holy angel, followed them, saying with a loud voice, If anyone, false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers, worships the beast, the Antichrist, and worships his image, and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he, false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers, himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, God Almighty, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his, God Almighty's indignation. He, false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers, shall be tormented with fire and brimstone, the lake of fire, the second death, everlasting condemnation, in the presence of the holy angels, and in the presence of the Lamb, Jesus Christ. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever. And they, false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers, have no rest day or night, who worship the beast, the Antichrist, and worship his image, and whoever, false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers, receives the mark of his name. Revelation 20, verse 15. And anyone, false teachers, false believers, and unbelievers, not found written in the book of life, the Lamb's book of everlasting life, was cast alive into the lake of fire, the second death, everlasting condemnation, for eternity, forever. In other words, if you worship the Antichrist, if you worship the image of the Antichrist, if you receive the mark of the Antichrist, you have sealed your fate, the lake of fire, the second death, everlasting condemnation, for eternity, forever.